All right, we're live, and today I just wanted to talk about uh, horrific incidents that happened yesterday in Afghanistan. I know people have been kind of become inured to Afghanistan, particularly seeing as how this is the 18th year, I think, that there have been American troops, although it's been scaled down. The presence has been scaled down significantly. It's the longest war we've been involved in, and people kind of inured to all these incidents of terrorism and IEDs exploding and ISIS and the Taliban and Al Qaeda murdering people. But there was something that happened yesterday, and David Wood did a video about this on his channel, Act 17 Apologetics, which involved basically what happened. There was an attack at a funeral, and this isn't unusual for jihadist groups to attack funerals. In fact, in Iraq during the war, there were a few incidents where the Al Qaeda in Iraq would lure American soldiers as a way of trapping American soldiers. They would lure them in, not just during the funerals, but something else that they would do. They would offer candy to little children, and when they gathered enough people, they would just detonate a bomb. But so they attacked a funeral, but also later in the day they attacked a maternity ward. Now this was in um, Dashti uh, Barchi. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it's a Shiite neighborhood in Kabul, and they attacked this maternity ward, presumably that had mostly Shiite women who were pregnant or who had just delivered, and murdered two newborn babies. High radical love, two newborn babies and their mothers, as well as a number of nurses and physicians that were there. They also attacked them. Hi, Miss Bluebird. And David's video was actually kind of interesting because he explored this a little bit. The Shia in Afghanistan, they're the third largest group technically. You have you have the largest, which is the Pashtuns, who are Sunni Muslims, and that's where you get groups like the Taliban. They were A lot of the Mujahideen were from this group in that region around Kandahar in the southern part of Afghanistan. You also have Uzbeks and Tajiks. Um, One of the main warlords, Dostum, was from that group, and you have Hazara, which are Shia. They became they converted in the or revert in the 15th century, around like the 1400s or 1500s. They accepted Islam, and uh, most of them are in northern part of the country. You If you remember the Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed, that was that was in the region where the Hazaras are predominantly, but they're kind of spread out through different parts of the country, and they have neighborhoods and towns around the capital of Afghanistan. So this maternity ward was mostly that that group of Shia. So the jihadists came in and started killing newborn babies and pregnant women and hospital personnel, the ones that weren't. Eventually, I think 100 or so of them were evacuated, but not before they had already murdered a couple of infants and doctors and nurses. I don't know the exact number of casualties, but It was pretty gruesome. Like I said, David Wood described it a little bit in his video, and one of the interesting parts aspects of this that I want to talk about was how this isn't rare at all. Even though this particular incident where you actually go and try to kill babies, that's fortunately that's unusual. But the whole idea of attacking and killing innocent people is not is not a foreign concept in Islam. In fact, if you go to this website called the religionofpeace.com, it's cataloged every single terrorist jihadist incident since the September 11th attacks. So it keeps a running tally of all of the incidents. And in Ramadan, I think there are fewer people who've been killed during this Ramadan just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The fact that there's a viral outbreak has has reduced the amount of casualties, but there are still several thousand, as far as I know, people who have been killed, or at least over 1,000 people have been murdered during this Ramadan, and it and even attacking young children is not anomalous when you look at the decrees of Muhammad and the Quran. And this is why you see things like the attack on the Pakistani. It was a military preparatory academy. This happened a couple of years ago. Now these weren't normal Pakistani soldiers. These were kind of like, I guess the equivalent would be the junior ROTC. But some of these students were young teenagers. Some of them were adolescents, and they killed, I think, somewhere between 100 and 300 people. This was, I forget if this was the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, or a or a branch of ISIS, but they basically killed a few hundred young Pakistani men. But you see this even more uh, in even more stark terms when you witness events like attacking a maternity ward. There's no other ideology or religion that gives religious sanction to killing newborns. I mean, the outside of Planned Parenthood, there's no other group that really endorses going out and murdering newborns. This is something that you see in ancient Israel, where you had kings, wicked kings, who would sacrifice to Moloch and sacrifice their children and put them through the fire. And in Islam, this is something that's religiously sanctioned. If you're not a Muslim, then your life is forfeit. And I just like to compare this to some of the other signal events that the media loves to emphasize. One of them being the mosque attack in Christchurch. Now, Brenton Tarrant, the perpetrator of that, he killed, I think, over 50. I want to say 56 people. I could be wrong, but over 50 people in that massacre, and it attracted so much attention because it was so rare, particularly in New Zealand. I think the last mass casualty shooting they had there had occurred almost 2 decades before. But this attracted a lot of attention. It gave the Muslim cosplayer prime minister there, Jacinda Ardern, the justification for stripping people of their rights, censoring the internet, threatening to throw people in jail for basically posting footage of this of this horrific event online. but the way it was portrayed was as if this was unprecedented. Unfortunately, it's not. I mean, there are mass shootings that occur periodically in different parts of the world, but they didn't they di- they di- they didn't acknowledge the fact that even as that attack was taking place, you had thousands of Christians in Nigeria that had been slaughtered at the behest of a Muslim president who basically allowed Boko Haram, the main jihadist network there, to run rampant, and Fulani tribesmen to go and murder their Christian neighbors. And this had been going on for over a decade and a half, and none of these things received acknowledgement by the media. And yet this one event, which attracted so much publicity, in large measure because it was so anomalous. The chances of you being killed in a mosque by someone who is not a Muslim are lower than you being struck by lightning. You have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do of being a Muslim who's killed inside of a mosque by someone who is not a Muslim. That's how rare it is. And yet this was emphasized. But um, just to take a look at that particular incident, he imagine a religion which said it's not only okay to go out and murder innocent people praying inside of their house of worship, but it's okay to go into a maternity ward and kill people who are barely toddlers, but who are infants, basically, who are nursing, or to kill pregnant women. Um, like, imagine if there was a group of people who went out and killed a bunch of Muslims in an Islamic nursery center. You would have people rightly be outraged by this and question why we're allowing this sort of twisted, perverse ideology to flourish. Like, why we're inviting imams? Why do we have a visa program for imams in the United States? To me, and to rational people, that would strike them as insane. Why would you want more people preaching a doctrine that endorsed killing pregnant women and children who don't belong to that particular religion? It doesn't make any sense. And yet people, for some reason, people don't look at Islam through this prism. They, primarily because the media, academia, Hollywood, the forces that shape public opinion and try to manipulate public opinion, for them, Islam is kind of a cudgel in their war against Christianity, their war against Western civilization. So they have kind of they've tried to brainwash people into believing that this is a normal doctrine, that this is a normal ideology, and that if you speak out against it, you're somehow racist or bigoted. When you actually look at the core doctrines of Islam, it's not compatible with it's not compatible with our civilization, and it's definitely not compatible with religious pluralism. If you want to have a country where people can worship freely and despite believing different things, can more or less um, be at peace in normal everyday interaction, then nurturing Islam is is at wild variance with that goal. And you just have to look at things like this. Or I like to compare it to harken back to World War II. And at the risk of invoking Godwin's law, I think you can compare it to Nazism. During World War II, you didn't have the United States giving visas to Nazi ideologists. You didn't have the USA asking, Albert Kesselring to give a lecture at West Point. Even though, if you look at the Nazi Party, it was just as as repellent to our way of thinking. And in fact, I like to use this as an example. If you compare the NSDAP, the Nazi Workers' Party, National Socialist Workers' Party, their platform to the platform of the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Now, these are the Shiite rebels that are trying to take over the entire country of Yemen. And if you look at the Houthi platform, it's actually more anti-Semitic than the 25-point program put forward by the Nazi Party. Now, part of that is because the Nazis were trying to downplay their anti-Semitism in order to get into power, because they realized that this was a turnoff to to a wide swath of German public opinion. They were turned off by things like Kristallnacht and this virulent anti-Semitism. But if you look at the actual platform, only 20% of it is Jew hatred, whereas the Houthi platform, which is based on Islam, albeit a minority strain of Islam, it's all anti-Semitic. The part that isn't anti-American, so it's basically denouncing the Jews and America, and that's the entirety of their platform, basically. So, and yet the U.S. would have no problem, with Houthis who sought to immigrate to the United States. And to me, whereas during World War II, we didn't elicit Nazi. We didn't give visas to people who were in the Nazi Party for obvious reasons. And it's just such a bizarre. It's just such a bizarre way of looking at things when you have an ideology or a religion that's responsible for so much turmoil and so much hatred and so many deaths. Like I said, if you just go to the religion of peace, you can catalog the number of deaths that followers of Muhammad are responsible for since the 9/11 massacre. If you just look at all of these things and how much, even in Western countries, where attacks are rarer, you still have thousands of people that have been killed in Europe and in the United States as a result of this ideology. So it's just weird when you see these things and you see the people who run Western countries. When you see how amenable they are to mass Muslim immigration, to even giving visas to Muslim imams, just things that, or even the Visa Express program for Saudi Arabia that facilitated the 9/11 attacks, something like that, even before the attacks took place, should have struck most rational people as insane. And yet our government and the governments of the EU is just are just immune to this type of reasoning. And like I said, what happened yesterday in Kabul is just a really stark visualization of this. But if you've been paying attention, you kind of notice these things. And if you pay attention to, and if you've read the Quran and the Hadith, you realize that it's not really an anomaly when you think about someone who actually believes in the precepts set forth by Muhammad and his companions and the Rashidun Caliphate. These are all things that are within the norm of Islam. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. Thanks everyone for coming. John, Radical Love, Scott, Miss Bluebird, everyone who was watching, and I will see you next time.